Welcome to Newshour. Tonight, the world pauses to reflect on the passing of Pope Francis. Jorge Mario Bergolio, the 266th leader of the Roman Catholic Church and the first to hail from Latin America. Well, the Vatican confirmed his death at 7:35 a.m. on Easter Monday, aged 88, following a stroke and subsequent heart failure. Well, from the working class barrios of Buenos Aires to the global stage of the Holy See, Francis reshaped the papacy with humility, candour, and a commitment to justice. He became known as a reformer with a pastoral heart, visiting conflict zones, speaking out for the marginalised, and urging decisive action on climate change. He called for a church that listens, heals, and walks with the poor. Well, tonight we examine what his leadership meant for the world, for the Catholic faithful, and for international diplomacy. We'll ask what comes next as the Church enters the period of seday, vacante, the seat left empty, and Cardinals prepare to choose a new successor. Well, joining us tonight, a global affairs analyst and an Italian journalist, each offering insight into a papacy that touched every corner of the globe. But first, let's cross live to Rome and speak with our correspondent, John Beaver there. John, good to see you. What's the mood like among the faithful, John, the people gathering in St. Peter's Square today, and how are locals responding to this moment of mourning?
Well, I think there is a sad and sombre mood here, to be completely honest. Of course, we saw Pope Francis on the balcony as part of the Easter address on Sunday, and then it was the morning, just one day later, that he died. And I think the shock of that is what has affected many people here. People that I've been speaking to have said that they just want to come and pay their condolences. I spoke to one lady who'd arrived in Rome, and she arrived with nowhere to stay. She just decided that she absolutely had to be here and made sure that she was here, and then was going to worry about where she was actually going to stay when she got here. That's the level of devotion that some had for Pope Francis. He was, of course, known as the People's Pope. He was a Pope who was not afraid to point out injustices in the world, whether that was poverty or climate change or the global south, the plight of migrants. All of those issues mean that his papacy very much echoed with a lot of people and were important to a lot of people. So I think that is something that is a reason why so many people are heading this way, and certainly that's what we're expecting to see in the coming days. Tens of thousands of people, likely to become hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions of people coming here to pay their respects ahead of the funeral on Saturday.
A lot of people, John, as you say, also a lot of work to do for the organisers. What signs are there of logistical preparations beginning for the funeral rites or public viewing, and what can we expect in those coming days around the Vatican?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is, of course, a moment to mourn the passing of the Pope, for people to pay their respects, but it is also a huge logistical and security challenge. So we have Rome and Vatican City gearing up for the arrival, as I say, of hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more, but also, of course, all those world leaders coming as well. So this is a major global event. Of course, this will have been planned to the absolute nth degree, and this is something that there will be a huge amount of rehearsals around when it comes to making sure that things run smoothly, so everybody knows their job. But of course, that doesn't make things any easier. You are dealing with huge crowds of people, you are dealing with infrastructure problems in terms of transport and accommodation and everything that goes with a major event like this, and then added into that, of Of course, as we've said, this is a moment of mourning, a moment of reflection for people. So everything needs to be done in the correct mood as well. And then on top of all of that, of course, we have these ancient traditions when it comes to the funeral process. Of course, Pope Francis has said that he wanted a more simple funeral than some of his predecessors, certainly trying to reflect how he lived his life, which was one of greater simplicity compared to previous popes.
John Beaver for us there, bringing us the very latest from Rome. Thank you very much indeed. Now, staying in Rome now, delighted to be joined by the distinguished locally based journalist, Mr. Carlo Marino. Mr. Marino, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us on NewsHour. Your perspective on this then, please. How has the Pope's passing been received with the people on the streets of Rome and more widely across the country?
I thank you very much for having me in this appreciated program from Southern Caucasus. I have to point out that one of the first telegram to the Camerlengo Farrell, the dean who is now managing all the state affairs in seday, vacante, arrived from the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. As you can imagine, the mood among the people in Rome is a peculiar mood, because when a pope dies, Rome feels very near this important personality. So it is an event, first of all for the church, but also for diplomacy, because Rome in next month will be one of the centers, if not the center, of the world diplomacy. Head of states and prime ministers are coming to Rome. Also, President of the United States, Donald Trump, is arriving to Rome, according to the last news. So you can imagine the capital of Italy managing all these big personalities in Rome. Anyway, the city is prepared to big events. There is a security system very good and very experienced in this field. There are the main security forces, but also voluntary associations which will be in the street trying to help pilgrims also, because this is a year, a peculiar year. It is also the Jubilee year. And so we have two big events contemporary, the death of Pope Francis and the Jubilee. It is, as I told before, a very important event for Christianity. In the world, there are 1.5 billion Christians, so Catholics, and the Vatican diplomacy can reach every corner of the world. Vatican is not a superpower, but it is surely a soft superpower. The Vatican soft power is very important. They arrived from People's Republic of China to Russia to United States, and we have seen how Vatican diplomacy has moved either in the war in Ukraine and in Palestine, to quote two of the conflicts now in the world.
And Carlo, we've heard tributes from around the world, the extraordinary affection and respect that so many people had for Pope Francis. What was the feeling like between the Pope and the people of Italy? Of course, he's one of many popes that was not Italian. What was the sentiment like between the Italian people and the Pope?
People in Italy loved very much Pope Francis because Francis had a very easy way to deal with people. He was not a personality so far from people of the street. Otherwise, he was his appeal for the people was above all for poor people, for people who has to strive to have a dignitous life. So Pope Francis had a sort of charisma. He was very loved from the Italian people. And we have to say that he had also enemies in Vatican. But his enemies have been those who had an established power, and these people wish to preserve their power. And Pope Francis has made a great fight against this power.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Carl. You talk about him having his enemies, I guess, like many different people. But that charisma, that humility that you spoke of as well, too, did that help with political relationships too? I'm thinking primarily of the state relationships between the Vatican and Italy. Did he shift that relationship at all?
No, as I told, Pope Francis had a charisma and he knew how to utilize it. He was following his the saint from whom he took the name, Saint Francis from Assisi. He tried to be near also to the enemies, or to far traditions of religion, different religions. For example, Pope Francis had built a very important ties with Muslim world. We must remember Abu Dhabi Declaration, and also he tried to create a bridge with the Republic of China. It is known that the Vatican has no diplomatic relationships with the People's Republic of China, but the official relationships are with Taiwan. But anyway, the Pope never renounced to the relationship with Taiwan, but created a secret agreement with the People's Republic of China in order to try a fruitful approach with this atheist country.
And Carlo, just finally, before we let you go, what are you hearing about the likely direction of the upcoming conclave?
So the conclave will be, as always, a sort of mysterious meeting. But we have to know that there are the majority of cardinals who have been chosen by Francis. So in this conclave, only 9 cardinals are right-wing cardinals, if we want to utilize this word. The others are on the line of Pope Francis. So we can hypothesize that there will be a follower of Pope Francis. This is an expectation from many people.
Very interesting indeed. Carlo Marino, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis, joining us there from Rome. Okay, let's go to Istanbul in Turkey now.
Thank you very much.
And cross live to the geopolitical analyst, Professor Tim Wilson. Professor Wilson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What made Pope Francis such a unique geopolitical figure then amongst modern popes?
I think his determination to do things differently, his determination, for example, to move out of the Pope's apartment and to live in community with other people in this strange sort of boarding house next to the Vatican. I think to emphasize his humility, to avoid a lot of the more pontifical aspects. For example, he wasn't wearing the red shoes, which his predecessor Benedict seemed to like so much. And he wasn't the great linguist of that John Paul II definitely was. And he was quite determined to do things differently. I think the statements he made, sometimes they might appear a bit rash. So, for example, his statement about LGBTQ people, about gay people, who am I to judge? Well, he's the Pope, and after making these statements, there was often a little bit of pullback over the years that followed. Remember, the Vatican moves very slowly. He signaled that he wanted more women involved in the church. And of course, there were people who thought, "Ooh, is there a possibility?" Certainly not. But what he has done is make a difference between the priesthood and the positions of authority within the Vatican. So more women are taking those positions of authority, and they're not automatically going to priests. The issue of abuse, he dealt with that, but perhaps not as effectively as he could have done. It's very entrenched. It's caused a lot of damage, as also the financial problems in the Vatican. Again, he touched on it, but it's not completed work. Whoever his successor is going to have to deal with a lot of the things that he's left behind. But he certainly touched on all the big issues that perhaps for so many years were not dealt with. And I think that's what's made him so interesting. He was prepared to say things and then think about them and slightly revise what he had said, or other people were stepping in to revise. Carlo rather brilliantly mentioned his enemies, and these enemies were significant and were active right at the beginning of his pontificate. Particularly, he mentions right-wing cardinals, only 9 left, but there has been a huge move. I would prefer not to think of right-wing cardinals. I prefer to talk about conservative, the conservative wing in the Catholic Church, which wanted to see the revival of the Latin Mass.
Which wanted to see... Sorry to butt into him. That's very interesting. I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that, these strong words like right-wing cardinals, or at least the conservative enemies of the Pope. I mean, many people have such fond memories of interpersonal relations with Pope Francis, his humble, kind, simple approach. It seems unthinkable that he would have enemies organising against him. Can you tell us a bit more about that, the extent to which that was going on?
I don't think it's the right time now to be talking too much about his enemies, but there was a whole group of churchmen, mostly men, I must say, who were determined to unseat him at one point, and were accusing him quite directly of heresy. But I think he turned things round. I think I think that personal warmth is to be set against his desire for reform and his desire to see pastoral priority. As I said, the church moves very slowly. And it moves perhaps slightly quicker than the Orthodox Church or the Orthodox churches, but it still moves in a leaden way. And but the pastoral thing, the difference between what is said and what is done, I think that's something that Francis was able to demonstrate. And Carlo mentioned the or you mentioned the relationship that he has with Italy. I think Maloney has said today that she had a very personal friendship with the Pope, and I think it's that element of Francis which cut through a lot of the animosity which was definitely there at the beginning of his pontificate. And I think people have gone very quiet towards the end of his pontificate, because he was so clearly a vulnerable old man who was decisively making his illness something that he was offering up as part of his service to the church. I think he specifically said this. I think possibly yesterday or the day before. He said that he was in his will, which has become public in the last few days. The final paragraph of his will says that he is offering his vulnerability, his illness, as part of his mission as Pope.
Tim, let's talk a bit more about how he lived, the way he lived, how he affected people. One of those areas that did attract some controversy, but also gave people a huge amount of hope, he was very admired for, was his interfaith work, that interreligious diplomacy. What's your sense of his legacy there and the importance of reaching out in the way that he did?
Well, I don't. It seems surprising. The Abu Dhabi declaration, of course, his relationship, particularly with the Anglican Church and with the Orthodox churches, and with Bartholomew in Istanbul. It seems different, but in fact, it's very much part of the process that was begun by John the 23rd and particularly by Paul VI following the Second Vatican Council. And you will see the trips of John Paul II, particularly, I think one of his first trips was to Istanbul to meet with the Patriarch in Istanbul. And then Benedict was very keen on the same mission. I think the present Pope has pushed forward his relationship with Islam, which is a really good thing. There's a huge amount to be done. There's a huge amount to be done between the Catholic churches and between the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches. There's a lot to be done to repair the damage in China. China has this very strange position where there's two Catholic churches. There's the Patriotic Association, and then there's the underground church. And the Patriotic Association was almost excommunicated, I think, by Pius XII. And Carlo said there was a sort of secret agreements. These have become less secret recently with the under Francis, and particularly under the work of his Secretary of State, Pietro, what's his name now? Parolin, Pietro Parolin. I shouldn't forget his name. He's one of the papabile. He's one of the people who is marked out as a possible successor. Though there is the adage in Rome, which Carlo would know better than I do, that those who go into the conclave as possible contenders for the papacy come out again as cardinals. And there's about 7 of these who are being toyed with as names in the media at the moment. And I think those aren't the ones to look at.
It's very interesting, Professor. From diplomacy, though, to morality, how do you think Francis helped maintain that moral authority? You know, we're living at a time when trust in institutions is at an all-time low. How did he make sure that he maintained that sense of authority in the institution of the Catholic Church?
Well, by trying, I think, to put forward these two views, that you've got a strict principle of faith and principle of belief, and he was quite inflexible. Actually, he came across as quite cuddly, but in fact he was quite firm as well about liturgy and about belief. And so, for example, the issue of women priests, the issue of communion for divorced people, the issue of the acceptance of gay people. When you look at the lettering of what was being produced, he wasn't significantly more liberal than his predecessors. But what came out was the extraordinary kindness in pastoral application. So I think he was trying to bridge that gap between the rule of law and the practice of kindness, the practice of charity, and that's something that perhaps with in the Catholic Church, with the legalism that can sometimes dominate, hasn't been so clear in previous pontificates. And Francis was determined, I think, to push that forward. I think the next pope will have some very interesting work cut out. There are things which were earmarked. So Francis had said that he wanted to go to Nicaea, which would be a celebration in the next or two, or when the actual celebration will be. The Council of Nicaea took place in 325 in May, if I'm right. Nicaea is now the Turkish town or Turkish city of Iznik, which many tourists will know is famous for ceramic tiles, but it's also the location of the first ecumenical council of Christianity, convened under the aegis of Constantine himself, who attended, and it established the principles of faith. And I think those were things which Pope Francis was very keen on. He was very keen on these facts. How you apply those facts is another matter. And so he wanted to go to Turkey to join in that celebration of the beginning of Christianity, and I'm sure his successor will follow that up if there's time. I don't know when the celebration will actually be, and I think that will be very, very, very central to the first few months of the new papacy.
Yeah, very interesting time ahead. Professor Tim Wilson, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Professor Tim Wilson joining us there from Turkey. Well, as the bells of St. Peter fall silent tonight, so too does a voice that called for mercy, dignity and justice across borders. Pope Francis leaves behind not just a church in transition, but a world challenged to carry forward his message of humility in leadership. As Rome prepares for the solemn rituals ahead and the conclave looms, a new chapter awaits. But tonight, the global church is united in remembrance. Thanks for joining us here on NewsHour, and from everyone here in Baku, goodbye for now.